For this fifth challenge, players begin in the ready position a short distance away from the net. They hold the racket in the forehand contact point. To find the forehand contact point, ask the player to make a low five with their hand in front of and slightly to the right of their body, or from your view, the left. Then place the racket in their hand so that the strings point to the net and the racket from tip to butt cap is parallel with the net. The right arm should be bent at the elbow. Younger players may start with their racket held up by the throat so that the racket is easier to maneuver and less tiring to hold. The left arm is up and parallel with the right. Parents should check that the forearm and racket are at a 45-degree angle from one another and not in a straight line. For players holding the racket by the throat, the handle of the racket should not be close to the forearm. Parents should check that the arm is at 45 degrees from the body instead of directly perpendicular to or to the side of the body. Please note that kids who have been introduced to tennis elsewhere may be inclined to stand with their feet side onto the net. However, for this challenge, players should instead start with their feet and chest pointing forward. If they do not, it is very likely that they will make contact to the side of their body rather than out in front. The parent gently tosses the ball in front of the player's racket. The player calls out bounce as the ball hits the ground, steps with their left foot as if they are walking toward the ball. As the player steps, their torso should rotate slightly away from the net naturally. The player then turns their hips and torso and lifts their racket arm upward and slightly across their body as they do so, bumping the ball back over the net to the parent. The player calls out hit, then returns to the starting position. For this challenge, players must make 4 bumps in a row to win the point. If the player misses the ball, hits too hard, or otherwise does not hit directly to the parent wins the point. Play until the player beats the parent in a game, then move on to the next challenge. On future attempts, challenge the player by asking them to start with their racket in the ready position, as well as their feet. In the ready position, the racket should be held in front of and away from the body as if the player was hugging someone, with the left hand at the throat as shown. The parent says ready to cue the player to go to this ready position. They then say low five to cue the player to move to the contact point. Once the player is in the contact point, the parent tosses the ball. As the player becomes more skilled, reduce the time between the low five cue and the throw. For this challenge, the player again begins a short distance from the net. This time, however, the player stands turned slightly to their left around 45 degrees. They hold their racket on their left side in their backhand contact point. To find the backhand contact point, ask the player to hold their right arm as if they were wearing a cast with the elbow bent at 90 degrees. The player then places their racket in their right hand so that the racket from the tip to butt cap is parallel with the ground and in line with the forearm. They then place their left hand on top of the handle with their arm straight or relatively straight. The parent gently tosses the ball in front of the player's racket. The player calls out bounce as the ball hits the ground, steps with their right foot as if they were walking toward the ball. As the player steps, their torso should rotate slightly away from the net naturally. The player then turns their hips and torso and lifts the racket arm upward and slightly across their body, bumping the ball back over the net to the parent. The player calls out hit, then returns to the starting position. Scoring in this challenge is the same as the one before, with the player needing to make 4 shots in a row to win the point. Progress this exercise to starting from the ready position, this time calling out cast to get the player to move to the contact point. For this challenge, players again begin at the forehand contact point, or the low 5, a short distance from the net. This challenge is very similar to number 5. This time, however, the player does not stop at contact, but instead continues the swing, ending in the forehand finish position. In the forehand finish position, which resembles the player sneezing near their elbow, the right shoulder and elbow should point to the parent, showing that the player rotated through the hip. The right elbow should be up and away from the body. The left arm stays up and is pulled across the body, ending with the hand near shoulder height. The hitting side racket face and right palm point to the left, and the player's right foot is on its toe with the player balanced. Parents should be careful of and watch out for the palm of the racket hand pointing towards the head at the finish, a side-on finish where the player did not rotate their body, likely finishing with their sneeze to the side, and the left arm flopping down rather than staying up during the hit. Progress this exercise to starting from the ready position as in the previous challenges. For this challenge, the player begins at the backhand contact point, a short distance from the net. This challenge is similar to number 6, however, the player does not stop at contact, instead continuing to swing out, up, and across the body, ending in the backhand finish position. In the backhand finish, which resembles the player making a muscle with their right arm and sneezing into their left elbow, the player's body faces the target, the left elbow points at the target and is up and away from the body, the right elbow is in line with the shoulders and is bent as if the player were making a muscle, the racket is diagonal across the back with the hitting side strings pointing out, and the left foot is on its toe and the player is balanced. Parents should watch out for and correct the hitting side strings pointing down or the palm on the shoulder, the right elbow held against the body or pointing to the target rather than up like a muscle, and the player finishing without rotating their torso. As before, progress is challenged to starting from the ready position. For this final challenge, players begin in the ready position. The parent then points to either the forehand or backhand side of the player, who then places their racket at the appropriate contact point. The parent then gently tosses the ball to the pointed side, which the player contact to finish bumps back. The player then returns to the ready position. As the player becomes more fluid at moving from ready to contact, give them less and less time between the point and the throw, eventually tossing without pointing.